in terms of speech, right speech and wrong speech. Speech that we should abstain from, and speech that we should actually cultivate. So there's this, the obvious one is lying. This is musavada. And having abandoned musavada, lying, he is one who abstains from lying, one who speaks the truth, adhering to the truth, reliable, trustworthy, not a deceiver of the world.
Well, obviously, the precepts, and then the precepts around the speech, they need to be taken as standards. So say you are able to abstain from it, and you don't compromise that standard, even if your life, even if you have to experience more nuisance and hassle and hardship on account of you not telling lies, it's still good to not tell lies and sustain that standard, because then that will enable you then to start seeing the problem of speech on a subtler level. Because each time you speak, each time you communicate with others, for an unenlightened mind, there are already these implications of ownership, self-view, me, others, internally, externally, communication, company. All of that is maintained and sustained through speech. That's why people often, when they try to even just sort of minimize their speech, you start feeling this pressure to just speak or say something or chat or communicate, because existence is maintained through your communication. But none of that will be really seen correctly or benefited from unless you can even keep the basic precepts concerning the speech. So no lying, no malicious tale-bearing, spreading of gossip. You have to abstain from that. But then then you also get to see that, and often many suttas, like when the Buddha was addressing monks as well, not just lay people, he was about don't be engaging in frivolous speech that's pointless. Which is the pointless speech? Well, any speech that has nothing to do with the Dhamma, it's pointless speech. And it should at least make a person think, because it sounds like, oh wow, so I can't speak at all. And it's like, but why is that a problem? Why is it a problem to be silent? If there is a need for something to be said, sure. But why do you also feel this pressure to say something in company that it has no practical value, and yet you can't help it and you have to say it? I was like, well, that is a problem actually. Psychologically, that is a problem for a mind that wants to develop. And that's exactly the point of solitude and abstaining from pointless, frivolous speech unless it's connected with the Dhamma or some practical purpose. You get to see that oh yeah, there was this dependence on this pressure to speak, to communicate, to say something, to touch the world on that level, so to speak, to keep in touch with it so everything is fine. And often there is that kind of slightly anxious, just touch base, just keep it, okay, it's all good. Are you good? Yeah, all good. No, it's your idea that it's all good. That's what you're trying to protect. And it's a form of control. It's a form of like, oh, okay, so it's fine, so then I'm fine. But the fact that you need to do that means it's not fine. And that's what probably the first thing a person that withdraws into solitude and stops speaking going to feel is that insecurity and anxiety from not communicating and speaking. But you have to go through that. And then when you do speak, you speak with a purpose. And you certainly don't speak out of that pressure to just speak something, to say something, and because I'm a bit awkward, or is everything okay? Is everything not okay? So all of those are your doubts, your own hindrances, and here you are acting out of it, because speech is a form of action. And it needs to be restrained. You need to stop, as we often say, you need to stop acting out of unwholesome states. Well, doubt, insecurity, awkwardness, all of that, acting out of that is unwholesome. Not immoral, but we're not talking about now, as I said, basic precepts that make you moral or immoral. That has to be covered. You have to be a moral person, keeping the virtue. Now, if you want to be the contemplative that does develop its own mind on account of solitude, correct reflection, gradual training that we often speak about, you realize speech is a form of action, and I keep acting out of compulsion almost. So I need to restrain that. I need to endure it, and certainly not act when I know for sure it's rooted in unwholesome. Like not necessarily anger or something, but like just frivolous. It's unwholesome from the point of view of mind development. So you could just reflect for yourself. So why can't I just be silent? Endure this pressure and say something when something needs to be said, but otherwise don't compromise that criteria. And that's how the Buddha encouraged even the monks that had to kind of group and stay in a group and live together for one practical reason or the other at a time, to just be silent. Not like you take this blind sense of duty vow of silence. I will never speak. Well, now you assumed another external observance. No, you could speak for the right reason. That's true. It's not like I'll just never act again. That's the equivalent of taking up these. I'll never speak. I'll never do any of this. I'll never act again. Well, that's your action. So you can't not act, but you can certainly unlearn to act out of pressure, to act out of unwholesome states. Because it's a very, very much a physical thing, speech, that you act out.
But if you can't actually be aware of your speech, then there is no awareness of your mind.
Exactly. So that's what I mean. The precepts, the behavior, that's fine. You have to be restrained. It's not really like. I mean, a lot can be said about it, but there is really no need to. It's obvious. You have to just do it. With any sort of virtue must be developed beforehand in terms of physical behavior and action. But then it comes to speech, and often even the Buddha himself would, the common 8 precepts, and then he would just have those 4 or 5 different types of speech that are included in the basic precepts. Because you realize that is like a kind of a practical point of converging for a mind that does want to develop. Sure, you're abstained from physical immorality by body with your actions, but there is now a lot that's sort of still coming through your speech, even not in a coarse manner, still keeps you basically connected to that physical, the assumptions in regard to the physical world you've been acting out of. So if you cannot develop and sustain perspective in regard to your own speech, abstain from it. Practice, as we said in some old talks, like develop the sense of a non-speaking mouth. Like literally, you are aware that you could speak, but you are not speaking, and you haven't been speaking for a while, unless there was a purpose. That becomes now an upgrade of your virtue. In the same sense, the Buddha would speak about keeping the sense of physical restraint, guarding the sense doors, creates this aggregate of virtue. So basically, a certain behavior you haven't been engaging for a while because you've been keeping the precepts becomes this solid thing that's now seen. It's not like you're doing it, it's what you haven't been doing. For a while, the mind recognizes, I've been dwelling in the state of not doing these things. And that's when that joy on a kind of unbroken virtue arises, that it would encourage you should think about. Well, in the same sense, you then get to see your own non-speaking mouth that only been speaking when there was a purpose. No more spilling through this physical orifice that you are communicating with the world you were. No more spilling for pointless purpose, for sensual purpose, for angry purpose. And you become aware of the fact that yes, the power of speech has been harnessed, so to speak. You are not spilling out into the world carelessly. You're not perverting the order and maintaining your assumptions of sensuality and anger and everything else through non-speaking mouth that hasn't been speaking. So the certain standard of when it's being spoken becomes now your criteria on account of which a samadhi and sense of joy can arise. And then what's happening in your mind becomes even more clearer. And then you could, exactly as the Buddha would say himself, once you start developing the sense of samadhi towards jhana, it's like the mind becomes pliable. If you want to think this, you think that. If you don't think that. Mind listens. Because you stop spilling it and perverting it and perturbing it through physical and verbal careless actions out of pressure and so on. So it's a very practical thing. It's not like hey, abstain from your speech just for some holy reason that will become apparent later on. It's an actual training of a whole independent domain of action through which you'll be maintaining your wrong views and everything else that basically keeps you liable to dukkha and non-control of your own mind. So it might feel like a bit sort of oppressive in the beginning. I can't speak, but again, you take it on in the same sense you take the behavior of the precepts, and then it becomes apparent, like, I am dwelling in a kind of in a mode of being of non-speech. Non-speaking mouth is my presence, it's my reality. My mouth that hasn't been speaking on account of greed, aversion, delusion. Same, like aggregate of virtue gets upgraded into aggregate of silence. Unless there is a purpose. So you're not artificially or externally adhering to I must be silent to not compromise the value of silence. No. All I need to do is not abandon the gateway where unwholesome things will become a reason for me breaking the silence, and silence remains unperturbed even when I speak. And that's why after the first jhana, the second jhana is called the noble silence, when you quiet even your thoughts on account of already quieting your speech. And by the way, that's another maybe side thing. People think like in the first jhana you quiet your thoughts and that's why your speech kind of falls off, the vati-sankara disappears. It's the other way around. It's by subduing, fully purifying, fully developing Samadhi on account of a joy, on account of a non-speaking mouth that hasn't been engaging in careless speech, you quiet your thoughts. So you quiet the speaking mouth and your thoughts will quiet down. Because each time you speak carelessly, your thoughts spill through speech into that world and maintain your wrong views about it. So you want to quiet your thoughts? Quiet your speech. And it will take it as long as it took you to quiet down your virtue, depending on the type of effort and quality you invested. You know, somebody who is immoral, not virtuous, starts keeping the precepts, it's going to be a bit hard in the beginning, and they wouldn't see any aggregate of virtue there doing it, keeping the precepts for them, and like, you know, they would have to do it. But if you sustain it, keeping the precepts becomes effortless, because it never was about doing certain things, it was simply about abstaining from doing certain things. And that's when that precept sila starts keeping you, so to speak. Well, same. Abstain from spilling out into the world through your mouth, through careless pressure, through awkwardness, through any other unwholesome states, through doubt, and your silence will keep your mind composed. That's it. So stilling the speech, quiet is the thoughts. Then when the thoughts are even quieted further in the second jhana, that's the complete silence. But you don't have to worry about the second jhana until you haven't developed the first jhana, and you shouldn't worry about the first jhana until you've developed your virtue and your speech beforehand. But it is like the speech ceases in the first jhana. Not because you entered the magical state of your thought, but because you got so imperturbed, so established in an existence of a non-speaking mouth that has been enduring for a while. And even when it spoke on account of things that were practical or connected with Dhamma and nothing else. So that's another reason why solitude is necessary for that type of development. You can't be in the world where people constantly try to communicate and talk to you and expect to sustain that level of non-speaking existence. But you can certainly purify a great deal of all the perversions in regard to your views about what comes first in the world, even in the world, even in day-to-day life. Just be mindful of, literally, of your mouth. Be mindful of what comes out of it, what you're saying, why you're saying it. Don't just, I'll just say it and then fully give in to what you know. Okay, I'll say it and I'll remain mindful while I'm saying it, and I'll remain mindful after I said it. Because usually it's, I'm mindful as in I'm refusing to say it, then I can't help it, then I decide to say it, and mindfulness disappears and I say it. That doesn't need to happen. You can remain mindful throughout. Even before you decide to say it, you should be mindful. If you decide to say it, you should be mindful. After you said it, you should be mindful. Which then means the reasons for you saying it in the first place will be clearer and clearer and clearer. So, yeah, practice silence. As I said, not as a kind of sense of external duty or some observance, but as a sense of, no. This is the gateway. One of the gateways, the mouth. One of the domains of action. Body, speech and mind. and it will develop your samadhi as well. Obviously, there will be no practice of right speech and silence and non-speaking mouth, as I like to say, if your physical behavior has not already been honed and tamed to a great deal. So, gradual training.